and welcome to the December Masterclass, and today we're going to talk about squeeze. Before we do that, I just want to inform you all that this is going to be my last Masterclass. It's been a pleasure to do all of these, and I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've been enjoying making these. So thank you so much for having followed me this entire year. So enough about me, now we're going to talk about squeezes. So, what is a squeeze? Before we start, I do really want to say that a squeeze is quite difficult. So, if you can't manage this, don't worry. It's just going to take a lot of time. But the more you see it, the more you're likely to make it the next time. So, if you can see a squeeze now a couple of times, maybe try to read a little bit about it as well. Eventually you can figure it out. And some of them come a little bit automatic, you just have to pay attention. So a squeeze is something I like to say is a magical way of getting an extra trick that you don't really have. Of course it's not magic, but it feels a little bit like it. What you do is you force the opponent to discard a suit that they really need to keep. They have to do that because they need to keep two suits at the same time. We mostly use this as a declarer, but it is actually possible to squeeze a dummy or declarer as a defender, but that is quite a lot more difficult, so I'm not really going to talk about this here. So here we're going to focus on squeezes as a declarer. The key to making a squeeze work is to keep count. This is, of course, not necessarily so easy, but we just have to keep count. In a few situations, you can just pay attention to one card, and if that card is not played, you play for the other suits. But in some situations, you really need to keep count of the suits to make sure if you can cash a trick or not, and which suit you should discard. So, what is needed for a squeeze to work? Well, there's 4 things that you need to have for a squeeze to work. Otherwise, it's not going to be a squeeze. The first one is you need to have the correct tempo. The second one is you need at least 2 threat cards in the same hand. And the third is the position of the cards. So the 2 threat cards, you can either say that you need to have 2 threat cards yourself, either in your hand or in dummy. But you can also say that opponents need to keep the guards of those threat cards, and those have to be in the same hand. And then the position is that at least one of the threat cards have to be after the person being squeezed. And then the last thing that I feel like is the one breaking or ruining most squeezes is the communication. We need to have entries into the hands with the potential tricks. So we're going to go more into depth about all of these, but let's just look at an example. We've gone down in the 3 card position, and we're in South's hand. If we now play the Ace of Clubs, let's see what happens. If West discards the Ace of Spades, we can discard the Jack of Hearts, and we will win the trick on the King of Spades and the Ace of Hearts. However, if West discards the heart, then we can discard the spade in North, so we will discard the opposite of the opponent, and we can get 2 heart tricks. So this is why it feels a little bit magic to get an extra trick, because we didn't have the trick. We were missing the Ace of Spades and we were missing the heart honors, but suddenly we're just forcing them to discard one of them, and then we can get the last, or getting an extra trick. So we will look at all of these 4 different types and why it's so important. So, tempo. We need to be in correct tempo. That means that we can only miss 1 trick. Because if we're not in tempo, we can't really force them to discard. So let's look at this example. We see that we're now in a 4 card position. So a very similar example, but we've added an extra card. Now we see that we are actually missing 2 tricks here. We have the Ace of Clubs and the Ace of Hearts, but we're missing 2 more tricks. And if we now play the Ace of Clubs, they just follow a club suit, and we can't really force them to discard anything. So a solution to this problem is often to give away a trick early. Because we see in this situation we can't really play a diamond to give away a trick, because East will be able to cash 2 diamonds and then suddenly we don't get the tricks either way. And also if we play a diamond, they can cash 2 diamond tricks and then the ace of spades. So instead of getting 2 tricks, we only get 1. So by trying to get the third, we would get only 1. So we don't really want to do that. But in a lot of situations, we can give away a trick before we've taken away all of our guards, and then we can be in tempo. So it's very important that we only miss 1 trick. And then we have threat cards. So threat cards are cards that force opponents to keep guards. So back to the first example, we see that the King of Spades and the Jack of Hearts is a threat card, because they need to keep the Ace of Spades and the King Queen of Hearts to make sure that we're not getting our tricks. But it's important that the opponent need to have the guards in the same hand. So we can have the threat cards in different hands, but the guards for them need to be in the same. So in this situation, we see that if we play the Ace of Clubs, West can safely discard a spade, and East can discard a diamond or a heart, and it doesn't really matter because the guards for the threat cards are in 2 different hands. So it's important that they are together, because otherwise we don't have a squeeze. And then let's look at the position. So it's important that at least one of the threat cards is after the person discarding, because we have to be able to discard the opposite. So the first example, we said that if West discards the Ace of Spades, we will discard a heart, and if they discard a heart, we will discard a spade. So we're doing the opposite. However, if the opponent discarding is behind us, they will just do the same as us. So in this example, if we play the Ace of Clubs, then we have to discard something in North, and if we discard a heart, East is going to do the same. If we discard a spade, then North is going to do the same. So it's important that we can discard after them instead of in front of them. However, we can have a threat card on each hand. So here we moved the King of Spades, and now we're suddenly in a very different situation, because when we play the Ace of Clubs, North can discard the spade, and now because we have 1 threat card in South, 1 card is behind the one discarding, now East is squeezed. So we see that the threat cards doesn't have to be in the same hand. We can have 1 in each hand. And then it's just not possible for them to do correctly. Of course, if they discard a heart, now we have to guess if we should play for East to have been squeezed, or if we should try to finesse West. In some situations, that's a complete guess. In other situations, we have count. And then the last one that I said is what messes it up most often, or maybe it's not, but it's at least the one we can quite often see. So we see that we have a squeeze, we're doing everything we can, but then we can't get into the trick. So let's look at this example. We're in North and we're playing the Ace of Clubs. Now we can see that East has to keep the Ace of Spades and the King Queen of Hearts. But unfortunately, we don't have any spades in North. So actually it's completely safe for East to discard the Ace of Spades, because even if they do, we can never get into South's hand to cash the King of Spades. So it's very important that we can get back and forth into each hand. So either we need to have an entry to both hands, or we need to be in the hand where we don't have another entry. So it would have been completely fine if we switched the clubs so that South can cash the Ace of Clubs. Now we would have an entry to North, but we're already in South's hand, so we don't need an entry to that hand. So it doesn't help us if we can't get in. And that's also a great tip as a defender. If you think you're being squeezed, think about the fact of whether or not they can get into the trick in the other hand. Because if they can't get in, it doesn't really matter if the card is good. So all of these tips are simple squeeze. There are a lot of different types of squeeze. This is a copy-paste from Wikipedia. It's also missing a couple of things, so there's even more. I'm not going to go into detail. They're building up a little bit differently, and there's some of them just feels like they have a fancy name, and maybe we do them, but we don't actually think about it. But most of these I have not done myself. They're super complicated, so we're not going to focus on this. We're going to focus on a simple squeeze. So let's sum it all up. Again, we remember that it's 4 things that needs to be working for a squeeze to be there. So we need the correct tempo, we need at least 2 threat cards, and we need the threat cards, at least one of them, to be behind the person being squeezed. And then we need entries into the hand. So we need to have the communication to cache the tricks that the opponents are being squeezed in. In all of the examples we had here, it's been about honors. So you see that if they discard the ace of spades, we know that the king is good. So we don't really have to keep that much count. But in some situations, it's important to keep count because maybe we have to see if they discarded a low heart so that the 4th heart is good, for example. That is much more difficult because it means you have to keep count in every suit. So we're going to look at an example here. We see that we have 3 tricks in spades, 2 in hearts, 3 in diamonds, and 4 in clubs. So that's 12 tricks, but we want to get the 13th trick. How can we do that? Well, there's a couple of options. We can get an extra spade trick if the spades are breaking 3-3, or we can get an extra heart trick if the queen of heart drops. But what we can also do is we can try for a squeeze. So what we do is we cache ace king of hearts, and then we take all of our minor tricks, and then we discard the 2 small hearts in north. So what we're going to end up in the 4 card position, we're going to have 4 spades in north and 3 spades and the jack of hearts in south. And when we play, our last minor trick, if either east or west, here it doesn't matter because we have a threat card in each hand. If one of them has 4 spades together with the queen of hearts, they will be squeezed. And here we're in the situation of not really needing to keep that much count. We just have to pay attention for the queen of hearts. So if the queen of hearts doesn't drop or it's not discarded, we will just play for the spades to break. And it doesn't really matter if we kept count or not because we're just starting by playing the spades from the top. And then the last trick, we're going to see if we make the spade trick or not. So in this situation, count is not so important. We just have to pay attention to the queen of hearts. The important thing in this board is that we cache ace king of hearts first. Because if we're not caching ace king of hearts, and then we start by playing the other cards, it's much more difficult to know which card to discard. We can still manage it, even if we don't, but it's just so much easier if we cache ace king of hearts, because we will very easily see if the queen drops. And maybe the queen was doubleton and we don't even have to play all the cards, we can just claim in trick 3. So that was a little bit about squeeze. Again, I want to say that squeeze is quite complicated, so don't lose your motivation if you're not managing all of the boards. And again, I really want to thank you all for following me this year with the masterclasses. I hope you have enjoyed them all. Thank you!